happening is that the old media is driven by advertising. So they can't say or do anything or support a position that would possibly go against what their funders, advertisers, owners of those media companies would like them to say. For example, GE owns MSNBC. GE is an energy company. So a lot of what you see on NBC could be construed as motivated by the energy industry's lobby or the energy industry's best interests. Vice versa, many companies on YouTube or many news shows on YouTube don't have any corporate funding. They're fan base supported by the people that watch the show. They have, they sell merchandise, or they have a Patreon where people can go and donate to their channel. For some of these, you can get interviews with the on-air personalities for a donation to the channel, something like that. And so they don't have kind of a corporate overlord saying what it is that they can talk about or what angle they're supposed to have for a particular news story. And this is really evident when you talk about, or when you think about the shift of America's interest in the Venezuelan government, which has been kind of ongoing in the last year, to the sudden shift in the interest of Iran and possibly going to war with Iran. And just to illustrate that, I want to read you some news headlines. So this is foreign news coverage of the stories coming out of Venezuela, and the news sources are DW News, BBC News, Al Jazeera English, France 24 English, so foreign news sources. And the headlines read, Venezuela crisis, military force still an option, says Guaido. That's from the BBC News. The next headline is, Venezuela migration could grow to 8 million, world's largest by 2020. That's from Al Jazeera English. Venezuela crisis, is Maduro or Guaido in charge? BBC News. Venezuela government says it derailed a coup attempt, and that's from France 24 English. So that's foreign headlines covering the same story about the kind of turmoil in Venezuela's politics right now. The new media coverage of Venezuela, meaning online, YouTube, those platforms, those types of kind of no corporate sponsored news entertainment, their headlines read like this. And this is from 4 months ago from Jimmy Dore. I use Jimmy Dore as an example because he's really on top of the Venezuela issue, and he's only on new media. So he doesn't go on MSNBC. He's not one of these political pundits. But his headlines read, 4 months ago, Venezuela explained with Jimmy Dore. 5 months ago, Venezuela propaganda debunked. People are against the coup. 2 months ago, New York Times publishes CIA propaganda on Venezuela. 4 months ago, Jimmy Dore on Venezuela, corporate news is the biggest purveyor of fake news. 2 months ago on Jimmy Dore, Venezuela coup fails and so does CNN. Jimmy Dore show 3 months ago, BBC reporter corrects US media on Venezuela with Greg Palast. So that's new media on Venezuela. Old media, domestic mainstream news coverage. Here's some of the headlines. Venezuela protesters take to the streets as Guaido calls for military defections. Maduro cuts relations with U.S. as Trump recognizes opposition leader Juan Guaido. Donald Trump administration muddles through chaotic response to Venezuela. Rash foreign policy leaves Trump with limited Venezuela options. Donald Trump surprises by not ruling out military option in Venezuela. And that was all from a year to 4 months ago. Now lately, the mainstream coverage of the Venezuela issue is, well, there's not much. They're not talking about it because the mainstream media has actually picked up a different egg that they're tossing, and that is Iran. So the newest coverage that I could find from MSNBC was 2 months ago. Meanwhile, that's still going on. The new media coverage about Venezuela and the foreign media coverage was from just 5 days ago. So it's clearly still an ongoing issue and something that the mainstream media for quite some time railed for when they were in support of the U.S. going into Venezuela to support Guaido taking office from Maddow, who was democratically elected. But now they don't want to talk about that because they're really busy with Iran. MSNBC, why you should care, or let's see, hold on. No, okay. The significance of Iran breaching uranium stockpile. That's from MSNBC. Why it matters that Iran broke its promise on enriched uranium. MSNBC again. MSNBC, Iran leaders lash out at President Trump over idiotic new sanctions. President Donald Trump announces hard-hitting sanctions against Iran. Donald Trump approved, and this is from the New York Times, but MSNBC reported it, Donald Trump approved sanction on Iran but pulled back from launching at the last second. So one thing that I've noticed, because I've been someone that watches old media, meaning mainstream broadcast news media, and or old media and then new media on YouTube and other platforms, there's always a disconnect between what new media is reporting and the guests that they have on to discuss the issues, and old media, meaning old media tends to, from my observation, take what the White House says and report that as opposed to doing investigative reporting. The White House says that Maduro is a dictator and he's starving his people. Guaido must be let to take over so that we can get out or get Venezuela out from the control of this socialist dictator. That's the old media drive line. If you look on new media, you have Homeland Security experts, FBI experts, people who have been in the Senate and the Congress, taking you a little bit deeper, along with news reporters like Abby Martin, who runs Empire Files, who actually went to Venezuela, and on these new media platforms and shows, they discuss how it's not the dictator's policies, that the socialist dictator's policies that are starving the people and preventing them from getting medicine. It's actually U.S. sanctions that are preventing this country from being able to serve their people. And they go through the UN reports as to whether or not there's a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela right now, and actually the head director of that faction explaining that it's not the government, the federal government in Venezuela that's causing the issues, it's the sanctions that the U.S. is putting on them. But that's something that won't be heard of in the established news. And if you hear it from a guest on a news show, say for example Rachel Maddow, you will never see that person on the Rachel Maddow show again. If they actually say that on the air, you just won't see that person there anymore. That's not the narrative that MSNBC or their parent company or their overarching corporate wallet, which would be GE, that's not the narrative that they want to flow down to the rest of the American people. So you won't hear that on there. And so that's just a few of the headlines and an example of the disparities between established corporate media and online free donation, essentially, media. And I want to bring this around to how what we pay attention to determines our reality. So if we view Facebook all day long and get involved in these political discussions or economic discussions, or maybe you're really passionate about the Humane Society, whatever it is, things that maybe we don't have control over, but we feel a visceral reaction to these news stories when we hear them. So that type of reality,